How are you really? As a therapist, I need to ask clients at least 3 or 4 different ways at the start of a therapy session how they're actually feeling in order to elicit an insightful response. I have to work really actively in order to help them check in with their emotional and physical state. This is due in large part to the fact that we are all socially conditioned to give what we think is an appropriate surface level response. As a result of this social conditioning and stigma around mental health, it's easy to feel emotionally isolated. If you want to learn how to stop emotional isolation, then stick around because in this episode of the Mental Health Toolbox, we are talking with Steve Cunningham and Lorenzo Gomez, owners and founders of a new mental health app called WeTree. As you might have noticed, there have been a lot of mental health apps on the rise to aid us in tracking our moods and practice ways to be more mindful and present. In this episode, Steve and Lorenzo discuss what separates WeTree from other mental health apps by aiming to stop emotional isolation. So let's go.
One of the questions in the survey was, what are your emotional/psychological goals? And what I got back, and it didn't matter if it was a stranger or somebody that I knew incredibly well, was everybody said, basically, I'm dealing with some form of fear and anxiety. And in some cases, I found out that people I knew incredibly well have been dealing with depression for a very long time.
Yeah, we've seen it as we rolled it out. I mean, I feel like it's become one of our core values. Steve and I talk about is, if we can make it easy for one person to go first, it's so much easier after that. But most people don't want to go first, and so I think that when we show them examples of people going first, or we as the founders go first, we're very open, even in our presentations, to include stories from ourselves and our family. It really does help people open up.
Welcome, Lorenzo and Steve, to the Mental Health Toolbox video podcast. Thank you so much for making time today to be on the show and to offer your wisdom and support to our consumers and listeners, our audience, other clinicians. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So I know you guys bring a wealth of knowledge to the space of community support. And before we jump into all that, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves and how you got into this field? Lorenzo, you want to go first?
Yeah. My name is Lorenzo Gomez, and I'm a San Antonio native. I grew up here, big Hispanic family, grew up in the inner city, went to a really rough middle school. I actually my second book was my mental health. It's what actually got me in the mental health space. It's called Tafoya Toro, 3 Years of Fear. And the Tafoya is the name of a middle school in the, as of like a year ago, the most socioeconomically segregated area code in the country. And I didn't realize that just going to middle school was going to be part of my mental health journey. But I grew up here. And then when I was 20 years old, accidentally got a job in the technology world at a company here called Rackspace. It was one of the first true startups in San Antonio, one of the only ones. And so I've been in the tech space for the last 20 something years. And then when I left Rackspace after 10 years, I was doing a lot of business development, economic development with the city, with a local entrepreneur. I was running the co-working space in his foundation, and that's when I met Steve, and we put the full court press to recruit him and his company and his family to San Antonio. And so we became close friends for the last 5 or 6 years. But I've been in the tech space. I never thought I'd be in the mental health space. I wrote the book mostly sort of as a form of therapy to sort of, process and get it all out. And that was sort of my first step, realizing that when I published the book, everyone else has their version of this story. But most people don't want to go first. And so I realized that when people had read my book, they would come and tell me their version. And Steve actually was one of the beta readers that sort of gave me great feedback before I published it. And so I had talked to him about sort of my journey. And he was going on his own journey, which I'll let him tell you. But that's a little sort of high level background of me and how I got here.
Wow, that's fascinating. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a really important perspective, and sharing your personal journey with the world through the form of a book or blog, and that is a very brave thing to do, right?
Yeah, it was definitely you definitely feel emotionally naked, and I mean, luckily for me, I had been in therapy since my mid 30s, and I felt like after going to therapy, I finally had the tools to talk about it and process it in a healthy way, and specifically to present it in a healthy way for my readers, so that it wasn't just this really big, depressing Debbie Downer of the book. I wanted to give them some tools, and so in the book, my therapist is a practitioner of transactional analysis. So in the book, I use a lot of TA. I write a chapter, I tell a story, and then after every story, I write a letter from adult me to 12-year-old me. And the letters are what contain all the hidden TA principles that I'm trying to sort of put the pill in the meat ball to get to the root.
Yeah, I love that transactional analysis. I love that. That's a
Yeah.
term you don't hear very often.
It's really I didn't know it existed until my therapist sort of gave me the workbook and gave me the assignments, and it was really helpful.
Yeah, narrative therapy,
Mm.
retelling our story of how
Oh
we
yeah.
frame our experiences. So I say hindsight's 2020, right? Well, we can use that. We can leverage that to
Absolutely.
inform
Yeah.
our
And also
therapy.
you just realize, oh, you think you tell yourself the story, I'm the only one that went through something like this. And then once you have the narrative to share, people go, oh no. Even if their background's completely different, they go, actually, but that feeling, I had that same feeling.
Absolutely. I mean, you start to see that all in the same boat kind of mentality where people feel validated, right? Like you said, somebody has to go first. And I've ran plenty of therapy groups in my years, as a practitioner, and it's always the same. Even when you have a new group, especially starting, nobody wants to be the first one to raise their hand and
Yeah.
self-disclose. Everyone kind of eyeballs each other, right? And that's just in a microcosm, right, of how the
Yeah.
world actually works. We always talk about the therapy room as being like uh, a controlled environment, but it's just on a smaller scale of how things work in the real world. Even the interaction, the therapeutic relationship, especially in the group therapy kind of setting, because there is that kind of bystander effect. Everyone's waiting for each other to open up, but once they
Yeah.
do, it's kind of like
We
this
see it in the
domino. Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen it as we rolled it out. I mean, that I feel like it's become one of our core values. Steve and I talk about is, if we can make it easy for one person to go first, it's so much easier after that. But most people don't want to go first, and so I think that when we show them examples of people going first, or we as the founders go first, we're very open, even in our presentations, to include stories from ourselves and our family. It really does help people open up.
Absolutely. So you've got skin in the game. Yeah. Lead by example. Yeah. I love it. And how about you, Steve? How did you get into the mental health app space?
Mostly by accident. I always joke my journey always starts off with I was a lawyer for exactly 1 week. That's where my story usually begins. I kind of from there became an entrepreneur and did a bunch of things along the last decade or so. One of them is a company called Read It For Me, which is a personal development / leadership development company that creates content. And the one of the things we did a few years ago was we started to try to help people uncover what was important to them in different areas of their lives, and we just created this. Basically, it was a survey asking people, tell us what you want in these 12 areas of your life. And it was only designed to be a goal setting exercise at that point. But one of the questions in the survey was, what are your emotional / psychological goals? And what I got back, and it didn't matter if it was a stranger or somebody that I knew incredibly well, was everybody said, basically, I'm dealing with some form of fear and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, I found out that people I knew incredibly well have been dealing with depression for a very long time. All of which was news to me. And my initial reaction to the whole thing was, "Wow, I guess I'm not alone. I guess I'm not the only one feeling this way." So that a little bit of relief. Kind of thinking about the idea of going first, it gives you that relief of, okay, at least I'm not the only one. But at the same time, I really didn't know what to do with the information because we had never talked about it in real life. I didn't know how to bring it up. I didn't know really what to do with that information, and it also wasn't the purpose of what we were doing. So I just kind of left it. So then fast forward into the pandemic. At this point, I'm have moved from Toronto and now living in San Antonio. Um, have become good friends with Lorenzo, and I noticed that even though clearly everybody was doing worse over the last couple of years than they were previously, but everybody was posting on social media about how great the takeout was that night, and like all the same repackaging of our lives in a positive way that which is in some part helpful, but when it becomes the only thing, it becomes destructive. So anyways, I knew people were still struggling, and we still weren't talking about it. So Lorenzo and I got together, and we thought about what is a way that we can easily create to help people start to talk about when they're not doing well. How do we give them a new language to use around it? And that's where we came up with the idea for WeTree. We did some quick alpha testing, turned that into some beta testing, and created a web app and then the mobile app, and here we are. Somehow in the mental health space by different paths and what the journeys we've been on, but so it truly by accident, but a very happy accident. We're super passionate about what we're doing, and we've learned just a whole bunch over the last 8 months working on this project, and yeah, that's kind of the quick version.
Wow. So it's still in its infancy, right? WeTree.
Oh yes.
But mighty, right? How many subscribers do you have now? Like to the platform?
We have almost 700. And what's crazy, because Steve sort of, uh, mentioned it briefly, but, when we were, I mean, I hate to say, these sort of classic cliche startup stories, but it really was sort of, let's talk about it. We had a Google Doc that went to a web app.
Mm-hmm.
And from the launch of the web app to our first paying customer was maybe 2 weeks. I mean, we were both shocked that someone actually was willing to pull out their credit card and say, and it just sort of validated how, I don't want to say desperate, but how aggressive people are for trying to solve this problem, and looking aggressively for solutions for it. And so we were really encouraged by that.
Absolutely. When you get cold traffic, as they say.
Yeah,
To a startup, beta kind of product, that's a really good sign, right? That there's that you found a need, right? Because really, whenever you serve, it's about serving a need, and then that usually gets reciprocated and validated pretty quick if it's genuine, right? And we all know that if there was ever a mental health crisis, it's now, right?
Absolutely.
Ever. So the work you're doing is extremely meaningful and important. That's why I was really excited to have you both on today and to talk about how this tool, this brainchild, this product of yours can really add to people's quality of life, improve their mental health in a need that hasn't really been addressed yet. In a way, it hasn't been addressed yet. So you're not recreating the wheel here. This is genuinely unique. So let's talk a little bit about that. What is WeTree, and how does it work?
I'm going to pass it off to Steve. Steve gives the best pitch, and then I'll chime in.
All right. Let's hear it, Steve.
Yeah, so I think I want to start that off with talking about the problem that we're attempting to solve, and because I think the product is going to continue to evolve. So if somebody's listening to this in 6 months, the product is different, but our core mission will be the same, and that's to end emotional isolation. And what we've found from all of the research is, when we look at why people get depressed, why they have fear and anxiety, both the prevention and the cure always comes back to finding other people in your life you can talk to about the things that are important to you. And so we found that piece to be the one that was the least served, which is it tends to be an afterthought of you should have some people that you should in your life that you can talk to. Make sure you do that without enabling or, without any tools for people to do it. And it's the most awkward thing in the world to say, I had a really bad day and I want to talk about it. Or I'm struggling with this issue and I want to talk about it. So that's kind of the starting point, is we want to help you eliminate emotional isolation, or end emotional isolation, as we like to say. So obviously there's a million ways that could possibly happen. The first way that we landed on, and we're still implementing, is taking the 6 different areas of positive psychology that was from, I'm sure you're familiar, and most of your listeners are familiar with Martin Seligman and his whole positive psychology model of PERMA, which is, for those of you who are not familiar with, that model stands for positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning and purpose, accomplishment, and then the kind of the practitioner community over the last 10 years has added on an H, which stands for physical health. And obviously physical health, as we're learning, has a huge interaction with mental health. So essentially, we're like, what's the most straightforward way we can try to tackle this? So we just started asking people, give yourself a self-reflection and a rating from 1 to 5 in each of those areas every day. 5 if it's going incredibly well, 1 if it's like one of your worst days ever. And then gave them 2 open-ended questions to answer. One is, what are you grateful for? And obviously, there's a lot of research around the idea of focusing on what you're grateful for is helpful. And then also, what do you need help with? And what we found is that through going through this exercise, when somebody's struggling, they might not have language to, especially when they're struggling, because you're not in a great headspace when you're struggling. So if it's just making a button red and letting the other folks in your world know that, hey, this is not going well for me today, or even just dropping a word or 2 into the open-ended questions, really gives people the opportunity to start to express those things that before they were not able to express. So kind of one story is with my daughter. We had her, as we were beta testing the app, I had her sign up for an account just to see if young people would understand this process and, is it easy to use? So I asked her, I said, hey, here's this thing daddy's working on. Go download the app. Tell me if you can do it. So 2 minutes later, she said, hey, I'm done. So she had created an account, done the onboarding, done her first check-in, and everything was great in terms of her numbers. So first of all, I was like super excited as a parent because she did something that I asked her to do in like 2 minutes.
Teenager?
Yeah, no, she's 11, but close enough.
Tween.
Yeah. And so her numbers were good, but she dropped into the what I need help with. She put in, I need help controlling my emotions, which is not something that we had ever spoken about before. So obviously there was something on her chest that she wanted to get out, that this tool enabled her to get that out, which enabled us to have a real world conversation about that issue, and then gave her the opportunity and the knowledge that whenever you're struggling, I'm here and we can talk about these things. And so that's kind of the solution we're trying to create ultimately, is this authentic connection about what's important to the people in your life. And that could be good things, it could be bad things. But how do we facilitate these real world interactions that are missing, that would eliminate emotional isolation and ultimately help people have increased PERMA, or whatever language you want to put around what greater mental health looks like. It is about those real world connections. So we're trying to get people out of the app, interacting in real life in a more positive way.
I think one of the things that I would add to that, if I may, is one of the stories that we found that people tell themselves that's an obstacle is, even with the people you love, you tell yourself this story, which is, I don't want to burden them with my issues. And
a big one with depression.
It's such a huge obstacle. And because we frame the app as a self-reflection, you don't feel like you're burdening them. You're just reflecting to yourself. The great part about our app is that the people you love happen to see it. And so in the app, it doesn't really work unless you add at least one person. So you want to add a person that you can be vulnerable and be seen with. But we have seen immediately, almost every time, that if you hit in one of the 6 perma areas, 1 or 2, which shows up red, you will get called by the person you're connected with because you're reflecting on yourself, but they're seeing red. They want to check in on you. And I think it's one of the ways we've been able to circumvent that lie that I don't want to burden people with my issues is in the reflection. And we've found, it's one of the sayings we say is the cavalry always comes. If someone puts that they're struggling, their phone will light up and someone will text or call them. And that's what's been so encouraging for us about it. And also what we've realized is, and I think that to your listeners in the space, we're really doing something. We don't want to sort of replicate anything else out there. So there is, apps that do sort of self-reflection and meditation, which is awesome. And there are ones that connect people with actual therapists and counselors.
Mm-hmm.
What we thought was missing was the space where you use the network you already have of close friends and family. And so we think that it's the most underutilized resource that people have available to themselves is your best friend, your spouse, your partner, whoever it is. And so we want to give people an easy tool to better relate and be seen and be vulnerable with those people.
Wow, that is such a valuable perspective. What a vantage point, because that makes perfect sense to me as a therapist. Because what do we say in therapy all the time? Where do we start? We start with the social support system somebody already has in place, and especially when we're dealing with depression or social anxiety, right? I don't know if you've heard of the interpersonal circle, right? But that's the whole premise of it, right? They draw different rings about, and they're at the center. It's kind of like a target, right? And in each ring is a different level of intimacy or how close they feel to someone. And they just kind of drop the names in there, how they feel, in terms of what things currently look like is a snapshot bird's eye kind of view. And then we talk about how can you move someone, who do you want to be closer? Who do you want to be further away? And who's the easiest and, as it stands now to start with, right? And what can we do there? And this app sounds like it really kind of, like you said, leverages that awareness, right? And in a way that's non-abrasive. There's less friction.
That's right.
It sounds like. And when you were talking about this, I was thinking, so does that mean it's like this open forum, kind of like a Facebook deal where random people can find you and respond? But no, you get to choose who's in your network, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, on one hand, it's a very personal decision. On the other hand, we've had users that said, hey, I want to put my entire AA group on here so we can all see each other. So we've created that functionality. We've had people say, hey, we had a parent that said, I want to put my daughter's entire volleyball team, and we've seen that, the athletic world is very stressful for kids. We've even had, people say, hey, we want to put our entire Bible study on here. So we've gotten different, but at first we thought it's only going to be people one-on-one. But we found that people want both. And so some people say, I want to be very private. I just want to pick the person I want. Some people are really, really eager to have their whole group and connect with people. I don't know if you have that, Steve.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
I would just add to that the idea of when we first launched the app, we got a lot of interest from kind of high risk populations like veterans with PTSD and children that are in the foster care system, and how they interact with the families in there. And one of the questions we got from a lot of people in that world was, well, what happens if if you think about those interpersonal circles? What if there's nobody in the inner circle, in the most inner ring? What do we do? So that's one of the feature sets that we're thinking about now is how do we solve for that population where they don't have anybody right now, and how do we find them? And that's where real world groups like AA and those types of organizations serve such an amazingly important purpose. And our experience has been from talking to a lot of the folks in those groups is that they're designed for a purpose, which is to get people to stop drinking, or to get people to stop taking drugs, but they don't solve for the problem of that authentic connection. They don't drag people into the interpersonal circle, into that core circle. So we're trying to help even those groups that exist start to help people drag people into that
Mhm.
innermost circle. And so there's all sorts of potential avenues for us to make an impact on this with. But I think visually, if I were to build a visual, it would be how do we help people drag as many people into that inner circle as possible, even if there's nobody there, because that's a difficult situation.
Well, it makes sense too, because even if, like you said, somebody doesn't have a support system that's existing, once they have the app, right? Even if they have no one, it equips them, right? So when they do meet somebody at 12 step, or they meet somebody at their church, or they meet somebody at their yoga studio, or whatever it is, um, then they can invite them in immediately. Like there's immediate accountability there if they hit it off with someone that they trust, if there's that unconditional positive regard and they have a confidant, right? Then that seed is already planted, right, in their head that, hey, I can use this app to have some accountability, and I can ask for an accountability partner.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right. So can you walk me through what the maybe the process is for somebody who, like, from downloading to setting it up for themselves, and maybe what that looks like?
Want to take that one, Lorenzo?
Yeah, I mean, so I think so. Currently, right now, we have a web app and then we have an iOS app. We don't have Android yet, so you
Mm-hmm.
can download the app or go to the web and you create an account. So once you create your profile, the immediate thing that you have to do is that we recommend is to add one person. And right now, you add them via email. Our next release will have sort of SMS texting where you can just hit your contact list. And so it's really create an account. We have, for all your listeners out there, we have a freemium model, free version. So you can add one person for free.
Oh, that's
So anybody
fantastic.
can, yeah. And then we have a paid version where you can do unlimited after that. And so we recommend you create an account, you add your one person, and then you immediately start doing your daily reflections. We call them the pulse. And that's the quick, perma questionnaire, the quick perma, the six perma areas plus the two free form questions. And we always say this is like developing a new daily habit, and only it's the most important habit you need, and it's faster than brushing your teeth. It's 30 seconds to fill it out. It takes you 30 seconds to look at the people that have already filled it out or have responded for the day. We found that people either fall in one of two camps. You either do it for the current day or you do it as a reflection for the previous day.
Mm-hmm.
I do it in the morning as a reflection of the previous day. And so it's very simple. We'll add more features on it, but that's really it's, hey, we want to give you this new habit that's really measuring really truly how you're feeling, and then we're putting you in with your other confidants. What also happens is when you add someone, as soon as either one of you does the reflection, it gives a notification to the person. And so, Steve and I are obviously connected on it. So when he does his pulse, I get it, and I immediately look and see how he's doing. And it's very simple. If it's all green, it's, hey, I love that your day is going awesome. High fives. And if it's red, hey, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to get on a quick call? I saw that you're struggling with these things, and I just want to put a quick anecdote in about that. Before we had the mobile app, we were doing it. We were checking every day on the web, and I had I was in my previous job and I was about to leave, and I had a really really terrible day. There was a big big fight at work, and meeting that went south, and all of a sudden my daily pulse perma scores were all red except my relationships, and my relationship was green. It was a 5 because the day it had happened, I had talked to Steve, I had talked to my parents, I had talked to my best friend. Like, I had picked up the phone, and Steve had this really amazing insight that blew me away. And he said, there's two worse things that could have happened to you. The first thing is it could have been all red, but the most sinister one is that it's all red and no one knows. And he thought, imagine all these people out there that are walking around with red for days and weeks, and no one just knows. And I thought it sort of put into perspective sort of the mission of what we're doing and what we're on, which is, oh my gosh, there's so many people that are struggling and no one knows. They're walking around,
Right.
they're lying to their friends and family saying, hey, how you doing today? Yeah, I'm great. Well, they're not great because we haven't overcome this obstacle of how to actually be seen truly and easily by the people who care about us.
Wow. That makes perfect sense. I mean, now when I look around, I'm going to imagine, some green dots,
Yeah.
empty dots above people's heads, and I'm going to ask myself, I wonder, if they're all green or what, because I'm a very visual person. So that really helps me, even as a therapist, kind of make it practical, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because,
Well, in the dashboard, when you do it, when you add contacts, you see a list of the people you're on, and it displays it in a dashboard with the colors. So
oh,
the
that's
way that
cool.
we engineered it was anybody that's got red or orange, which is sort of 1 to 3, goes to the top. So it sort of prioritized it for
Oh,
you,
that is so cool.
and so
Wow.
it is a very visual, and then you get to the verbatims. And to me, Steve, we always say that the verbatims plus the pulse really give you emotional X-ray vision into the people
Mm,
around you and how they're really doing, and that's
absolutely.
really the key of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, as a therapist, I this makes so much sense to me because how many times, do we ask somebody, how are you feeling? Even as a therapist, how do we start a session? How are you feeling today? How's your week going? Fine, good, all right, okay.
Always.
And I'll ask it again in a different way. So, how's this week been going? How are you doing? And I will literally ask the same question 3 or 4 times before we even start session. Why? Because we're so programmed to just say that because it's socially acceptable. That's what we say to people. And it's not even I don't even think it's a conscious thing.
Totally.
I think it's just, self preservation, safety, and conditioning, right? And it's not until somebody knows that you're really like, you're like, no, really, how are you? Like, and I think even somebody who maybe isn't doing all that well will say to themselves, I'm okay, because they haven't really reflected on the prior days. Because it almost without fail into an hour therapy session, like 45 minutes in, we'll find out they'll be talking about maybe some superficial stuff or, some little agitating thing during the week. And then as you're getting ready to close the session, oh, this thing happened Monday. Oh, I forgot all about that. Oh, this was horrible. It was traumatizing. It's like, oh, well, we can't really open that up now. It's like we should have started with that. But it's so true. I think until we're forced to slow down and reflect and identify what's actually been going on within us and around us, that we don't identify what needs attention, right? So many things competing for our attention that I think emotionally sometimes it's hard to prioritize the most important things. And that's why this app, to me as a therapist, makes so much sense. Right? Yeah. So one can find this app, you said, on the website, right?
Yeah, it's getwetree.com, www.getwetree.com, and then if you just go on the App Store, you can just type in. Yep,
Right here, right?
that's it.
The site. Nice. I like the colors. Looks so lively. The green, right? Makes sense.
That's all, Steve. Steve, you were
I
going to
like
make a
the
comment
I like
earlier,
the
right? I
branding.
want to make sure
Looks
you
cool.
got.
Excellent. So I haven't looked at this before now because I like to be authentic here. So I'm on the site for the very first time. Where would I go as a newbie to kind of get my feet wet? I would jump on here to start free.
Start free. There's a video up at the top if you wanted to check that out. But otherwise, yeah, you'd go to
Oh, okay, so we got a tutorial kind of
yep,
intro here. Nice.
quick
Very
intro.
cool. All right. Very good. And if I click on start free, then is that going to prompt me to, okay, email, right? Okay. Creates me to create an account. prompts me there. Is that then it'll prompt me to download the app, or you can access it from the browser as well?
You can access it from the browser and use the web-based version, or you can also go to the iOS store and download the app there.
I love that because I'm in front of my computer so much of the time, and then we have our phones and we're not. That's what I love about Google Keep Notes and other kind of web-based things that sync with apps. Syncs it seamlessly. It's very user-friendly that way. All right. Well, very good. This is your Instagram?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah. And if you scroll back up, Patrick, to there, you can see a quick view of it right there. The pulse.
Oh, right here?
Nice. Yeah. And so I think this is, so whenever Steve was referring to my bad day, it was just all red except green. And so it's really,
I see. Yes.
And to your earlier point, in the PERMA, what I love about the PERMA, and when, Steve was the one who actually introduced me to Seligman's work in the PERMA methodology. But to your earlier point, it's so true. I can say, yeah, I'm feeling good today, but at the same time, I feel like I haven't accomplished anything, right? So like those two things can both exist at the same time. And I feel like when you're forced to slow down, as you said, and really ask yourself these questions, you do really get a good general sense of, well, how am I really feeling today? And I think that's what's so cool about it.
Absolutely. It's like a matrix, right? Because it kind of reminds me of that Stephen Covey thing, the matrix of the priorities, important, urgent, important, not urgent, not important, not urgent, and important. Sometimes we get confused on what to prioritize. And this makes perfect, sense because that's what ambivalence is oftentimes with our emotions. It's these conflicting emotions, right? Well, everything is fine. Why am I so sad?
Right.
Well, there's probably some unmet needs there, right, that are being masked by some of the other accomplishments or the other areas where we feel we're doing well, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, this is fantastic, and again, I love the visual on it, right? The scores and, like you said, how everything is kind of bumped to the top of the list based on how people are doing. I could just see so many use cases for this, and I'm excited to see how it grows. I'm going to test it on my teenage daughter. Teenagers, if you want an honest opinion,
Oh, yeah.
brutal, honest truth, just ask your teenager.
They will. They really will.
But yeah, this is great because I think most teenagers, mine is a little, timid and they're not, always forthcoming with how they're feeling about things. So this is a great way, like you said, to kind of get that, that feedback.
Yeah. Or in addition to that, Patrick, I would say, let's just say your daughter says, you know what, Dad, you don't get it. And I'm not doing it. Even if she said, you know what, but I'll do it with my best friend. To us, that's a win. Just to have someone that can see you, I feel like it's so important. And I think that's really what I'm trying to do.
Wow. I love it. And so this is where people can find you on Instagram, right?
That's right.
Excellent. I'm going to follow you. There we go. Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Lots of information here. Excellent. All right, guys. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. All right. And like you said, more to come. It's still being improved upon, like most apps. And it's an ongoing project. So much appreciated.
Well, thank you.
All right. Very good. So any other words of wisdom and how we might promote this app as therapists, how we might position it in a way that makes sense to consumers?
Lorenzo, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Yeah. I feel like you've had some really good chats with customers. Did we have a counselor or a therapist? A couple on them?
Yeah. I think probably the best use case for therapists is to really get at how are your patients really doing. So you might use it as a way to check in at the start of a session so you don't have to wait until minute 55 to uncover that thing that happened on Monday. You'll be able to say, hey, Monday looked like it was a bad day. Tell me about that. So I think definitely the way we see this being used most effectively is in what do you do when you connect with somebody in real life? And how can you have the conversations that you otherwise would not have with the use of this tool? So that's one example of that minute 5 of your therapy session, and let's talk about that Monday that was all red instead of waiting until minute 55. Then from a consumer perspective, I think Lorenzo touched on, and we talked about at the beginning about going first. So letting other people know that you do want to have a deeper, more authentic connection and relationship with them, and that this is one of the ways that you'd like to start that journey. And then again, when you meet them up in real life, make sure you scratch beneath the surface with some of the more important things. Don't just talk about sports or the weather or how the kid's doing or the stuff we usually, because I think there's a version of what you said, and I don't know if I'm extending the interview now and if that's okay or not.
Yeah,
but
it's fine,
you basically,
absolutely.
when you dug into how are you doing, fine, good. Like the reason why we think people don't answer truthfully is we call it the great lie, which is I'm okay, you're okay, and let's not talk about it. And I think another version of that is when we get together, we talk about the weather or the sports scores or the latest gossip and celebrities. Really, there's a surface layer of interactions that happen that we never get beneath, even though we all really, really want to. And so using the app as a way to start to scratch beneath that surface and uncover, even if it's just for a few minutes, like we don't want to make every conversation super serious, and we need some lightness in our life. But even for a couple minutes, just to check in to say, hey, noticed some things are going on. Can you tell me more about that? As a way to strengthen those bonds in real life. So I think that's the way we mostly see the app being used, is as a tool to make your in real world interactions be more effective and more deeply connecting than they otherwise would be.
I love it. Absolutely. Yeah, I still use the archaic mood scales. Like I have handouts that I give that are a little cumbersome. Check the boxes and fill in the blanks. And this is obviously much more relevant and user friendly. So
yeah. Well, and also I think on the other side of that too, because one of the questions is, what are you grateful for? I feel like, you could go either way. You could go, hey, I see you're struggling with this thing, or hey, tell me, I want to learn more about that thing that you're grateful for and what's behind it. And I feel like it can take you down a whole other uplifting, positive, note to the conversations where it's not always so serious. But I think to Steve's point, I'd much rather have one of those two conversations than, hey, how'd your football team do? And it's which is great, but I feel like so much of us get stuck in this cycle where we never leave the casual conversation and get to something really meaningful. And I think what we're finding is users, really start to become closer to the people that they're genuinely connecting with in this way.
Absolutely. Have more touch points, get traction quicker on the meaningful things, right? Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, guys. I would love to have you back on in the future if you're willing to update us on the progress and new features and all that good stuff. So feel free to reach out when you're ready. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. So WeTree and another tool for your toolbox, everybody. So have at it. Play with it. Have fun. It's free, right?
The free version. Yep. If you have any questions, you can email us. It's Lorenzo at getwetree.com, Steve at getwetree.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Hey, if you're getting value from this content and you haven't done so already, be sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and podcast and share with your friends and family. It'll help to raise mental health awareness. Also, be sure to subscribe to the newsletter. That way you stay informed of all the new content as it's released. You can find the links in the description of this episode. Well, there you have it. Another tool to help you thrive. Until next time, make good things happen. Bye-bye now.